Hello and welcome to the presentation on water quality monitoring in the Nooksack watershed. My name is Phoenix Pham and I am an Environmental Impact Assessment Student Biologist at the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change Strategy. I would like to first acknowledge that this session was pre-recorded in our Surrey office, which is situated on the shared traditional and unceded territories of the Coast and Interior Salish people, including the Katzie, Coquitlam, Kwantlen, Semiahmoo, and Tawasin First Nations, whose land I am grateful to work upon. Let's begin with who we are. The Ministry of Environment and Climate Change Strategy ensures the effective protection, management, and conservation of BC's water, land, air, and living resources. It leads work on climate preparedness and adaptation. We work in the Environmental Protection Division, Regional Operations Branch, and the team I work on is the Monitoring Assessment Stewardship Group. We monitor and assess waste discharge into air, land, and water. We have both water quality and air quality sections. The Water Quality section monitors freshwater and marine water to evaluate the condition of water bodies in BC. We have several offices spread across the province. Why do we monitor water bodies? Well, fresh water is relied upon for so many things. Water treatment for human consumption costs a lot of money because there are facilities and operation costs. Clean fresh water is also vital for aquatic life and the rich ecosystems that are supported by rivers, streams, and creeks. For example, salmon is a key species in BC that relies upon uncontaminated waters and aquatic habitat. I want to explain the concept of a watershed. A watershed is the area of land that drains rain, snow, and groundwater to a common point, such as a creek, wetlands, lake, or ocean. They can be different sizes and scales. Smaller watersheds can be part of larger watersheds. BC has 466 watersheds. In the lower mainland, drinking water sources include the Capilano watershed, Seymour watershed, and Coquitlam watershed. Langley's water comes from the Coquitlam watershed. This is the Nooksack watershed. All the streams and creeks eventually drain into the Nooksack River in Washington state. The watershed is spread across Canada and the USA. In Langley and Abbotsford, the Nooksack River tributaries are Bertrand Creek, Cave Creek, Pepin Brook, and Fish Trap Creek. The Nooksack River discharges into Bellingham Bay, which is a key shellfish harvesting area. Together with Washington, we created the Nooksack River Transboundary Technical Collaboration Group, where we conducted water quality sampling in the watershed to find potential sources of fecal bacteria. We helped landowners control sources of fecal bacteria, taught the community through outreach programs, and investigated complaints. As part of the Nooksack project that ended in mid-2021, BC worked with Washington State to set a benchmark to monitor the amount of fecal bacteria flowing south into the Nooksack River. The benchmark was set at the 4 border sites on Cave Creek, Bertrand Creek, Pepin Brook, and Fish Trap Creek, and included both a short term to be met by 2021 and a long-term goal to be met by 2024, and was focused on E. coli concentrations in surface waters. For a total of 5 years, BC and Washington will collect water samples at these 4 border sites twice a year, once in the dry season, typically in May, and during the wet season, typically in November. We collect samples based on 5 and 30 protocols, where 5 samples are collected within a 30-day period in order to calculate the geometric mean of the sample results. From this, we are able to determine whether concentrations are meeting the benchmark or not. This map shows the 4 Canadian border stations as well as the sites that Washington monitors. We typically try to sample on the same day in order to compare our results. In 2021, sampling took place in May and November by LEPS. The results are summarized in these 2 graphs. The green line is the long-term benchmark goal that is to be met by 2024 and applicable to the sampling in 2021. During the dry season sampling in May, all border stations met the long-term benchmark with the exception of Cave Creek. Cave Creek had multiple weeks of sampling results that had extremely high concentrations, possibly due to runoff or improper manure storage. During the wet season sampling in November, All border stations met the long-term benchmark, with the exception of Bertrand Creek. As you probably recall, the Nooksack River overtopped and caused widespread flooding in the Fraser Valley. The Nooksack area received over 500 millimeters of rainfall during November 2021. We will continue to sample at the border stations and report out on the results until 2024. Where we find high concentrations, we typically refer this to our compliance team or another responsible agency. There can be a lot of sources of pollution in water. The Nooksack River Transboundary Technical Group focused on fecal contamination to surface waters. Sources of fecal contamination in the Nooksack watershed include proper manure handling at livestock farms, composting facilities, dog kennels, greenhouses, mushroom growers, gravel pits, septic systems, and wildlife like duck and deer. In the Bertrand Creek area, there are 70 cow farms, 52 chicken farms, and 190 horse ranches. There are also 941 houses that use a septic system. All these sources have the potential to include contamination into the local waterways. The animals may not poop directly in the creek, but feces can end up in the river through rain runoff or septic system failures. Did you know that the average beef cow can produce 82 pounds of manure per day? And the average dairy cow can produce 137 pounds of manure per day? That means at least 6,070 pounds of manure are created per day in the Bertrand area alone. That's only if each farm has just one cow, but they likely have more. When there are high concentrations of bacteria in surface waters, this indicates that animal or human waste have entered the river, stream, or creek. Fecal coliforms are bacteria from the intestines and feces of people and warm-blooded animals. E. coli is a subgroup of fecal coliform bacteria. This bacteria can be harmful to human health, causing stomach cramps, diarrhea, and in rare cases, kidney failure. Humans can come into contact with the bacteria by eating or drinking or washing fruits and vegetables with contaminated waters. Shellfish grown in contaminated waters can pick up harmful bacteria that can impact human health if consumed. High levels of nutrients, such as phosphorus and nitrogen in surface waters, can cause eutrophication or algae blooms. Too much phosphorus can lead to heavy algae growth, which then consumes the oxygen and sunlight needed by aquatic organisms such as benthic invertebrates, amphibians, or fish. Sources of contamination in Pepin, Bertrand, and Fish Trap Creeks come from many sources. It is important for everyone who live within these watersheds to each do their part to reduce sources of pollution. If you work with manure, here are the general storage rules to protect our water from fecal contamination. Divert runoff water from entering the storage area. Cover manure and compost piles while storing to prevent rainwater contacting the waste, which can run off into ditches, streams, and groundwater. Avoid spreading manure during the rainy seasons. Follow the minimum setbacks from drinking water sources, watercourses, and property boundaries. Don't store manure for more than 9 months. And prevent wildlife, pests, and domestic pets from accessing the manure storage area. There are more rules for storing manure in the Code of Practice for Agricultural Environmental Management. If you see improper practices or see dirty water in creeks, it's best to report it to the RAPP line. This is the number and website you can call or submit an online report for environmental violations. It's open 24/7. Here are some additional resources for more information. You can visit the Government of BC website. From there, you can find links to pages for the Ministry of Environment, Ministry of Agriculture and Food, as well as the Ministry of Health. The Ministry of Agriculture and Food will provide more details on manure storage, and the Ministry of Health and BC Centre for Disease Control have more information on drinking water and E. coli. Thank you so much for your time and listening to my presentation. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact us.